Morning, all. Normally, normally I would be posting a news of the day slash preview video, and that's coming. There will be a news of the day preview video coming. But I want to talk about my fandom because when I do reviews, and especially during playoffs when everything's so hotly contested and everybody's all upset, I do these reviews where I'll wear, like last night, I wear an Islanders jersey and hat. No problem. Islanders beat the Bruins. Okay. Everybody else is all mad, and I saw comments like, "Oh, Shannon's mad. He has to be angry. He's got it." No, I wasn't. I wasn't angry. I just watched the game and went, "Well, that's done," and I moved on to the next thing. I just that's that. Last night I caught up on Legends of Tomorrow, and watched the latest episode of that, and watched some news, and yeah, that's basically how my night went. I don't get mad watching hockey games. It's a general rule. I don't. I don't rail about officiating. I don't throw things. I don't scream. I know when we used to do live streams during games, and I don't anymore. But when we used to, it was weird to me how people would expect a reaction that wasn't necessarily there. It was kind of hard to perceive a reaction from me when a team would score against a team I cheered for, or when my team would score, unless it's overtime. Overtime is the one time that I will allow myself to celebrate. But if a team I cheer for loses in overtime, I go, that's about it. This board shows you every team that's knocked out a team I've cheered for since 1981, when I really started watching hockey. And of course, I saw games in 79 and 80 when I was 6 and 7 years old, respectively, but I wasn't really into it. Honestly, hockey was kind of tied with baseball for which sport I liked the best when I was a little kid. Easily could have become the baseball guy if things had gone a little different. If the Expos had won a World Series, I probably would have been a baseball guy. But they never did, because they made sure they weren't allowed. The year that there was no World Series awarded, the Expos had an excellent chance, so can't have that. But yeah, so I don't get mad, because where I would get mad might have been like in Vancouver. I'm not going through all of it. I've already done a video where I've gone through all of it. I did a video while I was in Vegas on how I believed I was the jinx. Where I thought the one thing these teams have in common is I cheer for them. And every now and then they'll break through and win something, but in general, they don't. So 1982 with the Canucks, that was kind of soul crushing in that I was young, very young. I was still in the single digits, right, in age. So I believed that the Canucks had a chance against the Islanders, and then they didn't. After that, 83 was kind of a crushing one because Calgary took them out in the first round, so you weren't even able to repeat that. And then they don't make it out of the first round until 1992, which was my favorite Canucks team ever, still is, the 91-92 Canucks. I still think that was the best team they ever had. Keep in mind that as recently as 1990, they had missed the playoffs. So the whole idea, if you're out of the playoffs, you're done. And this was a 16 out of 21 teams makes the playoffs league, not a 16 out of 31 teams makes the playoffs league. So while there's a lot of people who will look at teams right now that are outside the playoffs and go, oh, they're done, they're screwed. They're not, though. So for the Canucks, they did turn around in 92, but in the playoffs, they lost to the Oilers. That was just so frustrating. I was so angry. 94, of course, the finals against the Rangers, where I believe the Rangers were going to win the series, and then the Canucks win games 5 and 6, and I'm like, hey, maybe. And then game 7, the Rangers go, ha, just kidding. Yeah, we're not going to let you have it. 95, that year I got mad. That was the Chicago Blackhawks knocking out Vancouver, and that was an arduous series, and there was a lot of overtime. There was a lot of close games, but the Canucks just couldn't win them. They just didn't have it. And it was amazing how quickly they went from this legendary group in 94 to just 95. It just wasn't there. And then by 96, it was all falling apart. They got taken out easily in the first round by Colorado, who were on their way to their first Stanley Cup. And then in 2001, when the Canucks got back into the playoffs, they got taken out by Colorado, who were on their way to their second Stanley Cup. So if there's a failing for the Colorado Avalanche, it's that they don't play the Canucks in the playoffs. So if they don't beat Vegas, you can look back and go, man, if only we'd played the Canucks. We are undefeated in the Stanley Cup playoffs when we've played the Canucks in series through history. Because it's not like Vancouver ever played the Quebec Nordiques. That never happened. Sadly, because that would have been a fun series, but didn't happen. So over to Boston, and I've got Cam Neely here. I've got hometown team here. Cam Neely is the reason that I started cheering for the Bruins. When the Canucks traded Neely there. and Andy Moog being traded from Edmonton to Boston. I loved Andy Moog. I was never a Grant Fuhr fan. When I was a kid, I never understood why they chose Fuhr over Moog. And you can use a lot of reasons right now, and I can look back at the stats right now and go, I get it. But at the time, as a kid, I did not understand why Andy Moog wasn't getting games and at all, and he was kind of just being shunted aside. So when he went to Boston, I was a huge Bruins fan based on that. And then they go to the finals and lose to Edmonton. So I was like, yes, Moog's got a chance for revenge, and that was quick. 1990. Andy Moog's got a chance for nope. Now, of course, he was also in tandem with Reggie Lemelin. Reggie Lemelin was a very good goaltender as well for the Bruins, and that tandem was fantastic. And I love that tandem. And yet, the one time I called Dan Russell Sports Talk and got through, I asked Harry Neal the question about when I thought they might be done with Lemelin and Moog, that maybe, they were going to start to look at make some kind of replacement, and Harry Neal answered me with, I think they're quite happy with what they've got with Moog and Lemelin, and I don't see any need for them to even consider making changes. And a couple of years later they did, but Harry was right at the time, and I was just concerned as a fan that at some point this tandem was going to have issues, and I didn't see anybody on the horizon that was going to take over. And the Bruins, the interesting thing is that we assume the Bruins are in the playoffs every year. They're really not. I think there's a lot of hate towards the Bruins. I had no idea either when I adopted the Bruins. The first jersey I ever had was a Bruins jersey, and it was a friend of my dad's that gave it to me because he just didn't wear it anymore. The Bears were gone off the shoulders. All that was left behind was there's this glue that CCM uses to glue all the shoulder patches on. That's all that was left. I don't know why he didn't keep them. But anyways, yeah. So, I mean, I had that Bruins jersey. I'd wear it to school, and I'm kind of cool because nobody else cheered for the Bruins. And that was kind of a thing, too, that there weren't other Bruins and North Stars fans that I knew at the time. I know Bruins fans now, and there are Bruins fans around here. There absolutely are. When I go to Canucks games against the Bruins, if I wear my Bruins jersey because I'm like, yep, the Bruins need this game and the Canucks are not in the playoffs, then I always see Bruins jerseys there, which is not unusual in Vancouver to see Canuck fans. There was one fan that sat in front of me at a game who's trying to give me a hard time of wearing a Bruins jersey to a Canucks game, and then he goes, well, yeah, but when Montreal's here, I wear the Habs jersey. Right, yeah. So the Habs have always been the bane of the existence of any Bruins fan. And I always joke around that I can't cheer for Montreal because I cheer for the Bruins. And there's some truth to that. So 84, 85, 86, 87, 89, 2002, 2004, 2008, 2014. All of these years, the Boston Bruins were taken out in the playoffs by the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens have always... But that being said... when I'm watching Montreal and the Jets last night, I'm not watching it going, I hope the Habs get destroyed. I can't stand this. I don't do that. The last time that I remember getting upset about the Bruins getting knocked out of the playoffs, really mad about it. I mean, there's the only reason that I usually get mad too. It's not because of a team beating them. It's because I feel like that was their chance. Going back over to the Canucks, 2003, they lose in round 2 against Minnesota. I wasn't mad as much about them blowing a 3-1 series lead as I was about feeling that the 2003 Stanley Cup playoffs were wide open. This was not a playoffs where I felt like there was a odds-on greatest, or that I felt like this was one team that was a juggernaut against all the others. I felt like everybody that was left as pretty equal. I felt like that playoffs could go anyway, and I felt like if the Canucks could get past Minnesota, they had an excellent chance of winning the Cup that year. They didn't, because that's just the Canucks way. It's sort of like in the Mandalorian, how the Mandalorian says this is the way, but if you're following the Canucks, it's into a fire, and you're like, I don't think that's the way to go. No, this is the way. I don't think that's the way. But we as Canuck fans always kind of go, yeah, all right, into the fire we go. And it's happened. Like, I've watched so many rebuilds. This is why I don't get mad about, like, right now everybody, it seems to lose their minds over the fact that Toffoli's doing really well for Montreal. Well, Montreal has a good track record against teams I cheer for. At least against Boston, right? But It's just that's the Canucks way. I've watched going back to Cam Neely. Guys leave Vancouver, they do well. I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me. I don't get mad about it. Doesn't matter who the GM is. It's just that's the way that works. You leave Vancouver, you're probably gonna have a pretty good time. Maybe you'll win a cup ring after you've left. And fans arguing now and getting all mad now would have got mad in the late '80s at Pat Quinn, before Pat Quinn became a hero with the 1994 Finals run. Yeah, he was plenty criticized by media, by fans, in general. And then all of a sudden, the Canucks start turning things around, and Quinn becomes a hero. And I always loved Pat Quinn. I saw what he was trying to do, but it just never quite got them to the championship. They get to that game 7, they don't win it. And for Boston, I've watched them go to the finals in 2019, 2013, 1990, 1988. So, the 2011 Stanley Cup, it's great. But I've watched them lose plenty. And so whether it's round 1 against Minnesota here in 1981, whether it's round 1 against Montreal in 84, round 1 against Montreal in 85, round 1 against Montreal in 86, round 1 against Montreal in 87, round 2 against Montreal in 1989, there's a pattern here. This is why I've said in history videos, Montreal versus Boston is a bad matchup for Boston. And of course, Boston fans now would be like, what are you talking about? Boston's so much better than Montreal. Yeah. But when they meet in the playoffs, right? Because still, the most recent defeat Boston has against Montreal is 2014. It's not really that long ago. So over onto the Dallas-Minnesota side. Minnesota went to the Stanley Cup Finals the first year I was really into hockey, which was 80-81. And so, I've got my fandom of the Canucks, which is kind of the, obviously, but they lose against Buffalo, and it wasn't really difficult for Buffalo. I don't know that the Sabres broke a sweat that year. But watching Minnesota go to the finals was great. That was also the year that I became a big fan of Pat Regan out of Calgary, because I didn't know I wasn't allowed to cheer for Calgary. I was a little kid. So, yeah, Minnesota, I was a fan. And Kevin Maxwell, I met him. I had a pennant of the finals between Minnesota and the New York Islanders. No, I don't still have it. Which was signed by Kevin Maxwell of the Minnesota North Stars. And I thought that was pretty cool when I was a little kid, that a guy who played in the NHL had signed something that I had on my wall. That made me a Minnesota North Stars fan immediately. But the North Stars were generally disappointing after that. So it was another 10 years before they go back to the finals, which was 1991. That was a team that had no business going to the finals. That was a fun year. Except 91, Pittsburgh knocks out the Boston Bruins in the conference finals. And then in the finals, they knocked out Minnesota. So they knocked out my favorite teams back to back. I wasn't a very happy camper with Pittsburgh. I was actually quite angry with Pittsburgh that year. So while everybody else is going, yay, Mario won one, I'm like, damn it, I could have had Boston and Minnesota in the finals. I hate you, Mario Lemieux. So, see, there's lots of reasons in there. But again, that's a long time ago. Between then and now, there's been a lot of mostly disappointment. And mostly, well, that's it. Like last year, Dallas makes it to the Stanley Cup Finals and loses to Tampa. And I'm like, well, that was fun. Not getting back next year. And there were comments of, what do you mean they're not going to go back next year? They could go back next year. They got a really good team. And I'm like, but not really. Teams that I cheer for going back to the Stanley Cup Finals, Dallas did it. 1999 they won the Cup. 2000 they went to the Stanley Cup Final. Absolutely great series against New Jersey in 2000. But they lose that series. So my dreams and desires of back-to-back Cups for Dallas dashed, and they're a one and done. And to me, Boston's kind of a one and done as well. Boston misses the playoffs in 2015 and 2016. Years that this channel was in existence. But again, Boston, there's this whole dislike everybody has for Boston. So when they make the playoffs, there's not a lot of celebrating. There's sort of a, great, Boston's in there again. How can we knock out that Marchand guy? How can we knock out everybody? So when I'm watching these games now, I always have this in the back of my mind. There is so much built up disappointment. If it's written in navy marker, it's a disappointment. If it's in magenta, that was a year that I was happy. So 1999 and 2011. But remember, the asterisk on 2011 is I was cheering for Vancouver in that Stanley Cup final, not Boston. So while Boston won, and I was happy for Tim Thomas, Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, and all the others, I really wanted Vancouver to win that series. It was heartbreaking Vancouver didn't win the series. And so that's my relationship with hockey. So if Boston loses against the Islanders, that's how it works. It doesn't mean I have to hate the Islanders. It doesn't mean I'm going to come on here and I'm going to yell and scream. It doesn't mean that I'm going to freak out if there's a bad call that leads to a goal, because there's bad calls going all the way back to 1981. There are offside goals. 1980. If you're old enough to know, you know. There's been some offside goals in NHL history. It's Bob Nystrom, wasn't it, that was offside? Right? So, and that's part of hockey's history too. The question is whether or not franchises bounce back from those things, or if they don't. So, do I think that teams can bounce back from badly refereed games? Yeah. But badly refereed games go, and I can remember games from the 80s where people were complaining constantly. Whether it was Andy Van Hellemond, Don Koharski, Kerry Fraser, and the list goes on and on. There's a reason I know the referees' names. It's not because, yay, he's just fantastic. Although the hair on Kerry Fraser was fantastic. Man didn't need a helmet. He had the hair. But yeah, so, whether it's finals, you've got 3 finals here, 4 finals here where the team I cheer for lost, 3 finals here where the team I cheered for lost, Stanley Cup where the team I cheered for actually won. This cup here, again, I was cheering for the team that was against them, technically. And I wanted that series to go 7. That was a weird thing. I remember the 2011 Stanley Cup Finals. I was going to record every game because it was 10 years ago. So, of course, you're going to record every game, right? And so I was going to record every game. And after the first game, which I did record, I decided, no, that game was boring. I was like, I'm not going to want to look back on this series and watch back all 7 games. Nah, forget it. So I had waited my entire hockey fandom since about 87 here because, Cam Neely and all that. And when it finally happens, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to want to remember this series. Little did I know how accurate that would be. But, I love hockey. Just in general, I love hockey. I don't get overly upset with games anymore because of all the stuff. And because when you watch every game and you watch every team, it definitely erodes your hatred of certain teams and certain players. It gets eroded as well. I'm always surprised at playoff time at which players are considered dirty. That all season I watch a player and I'm like, oh, he's pretty good. And then in the playoffs something happens and immediately everybody's like, what a dirty player. And I'm like, actually, no. I've watched all these games. He's not, but I won't say it in videos now because I know that just leads to further things. But yeah, fans get very emotional this time of year. I don't. I really think that people would be disappointed in watching. If you stood in this room and watched a playoff game with me, you'd probably be really disappointed. You'd be like, wow, he just doesn't react. I mean, if I don't crank the TV. If you were upstairs listening, you wouldn't even know I was watching hockey games. You have no idea. And that's even when Boston wins. Unless at the end of the game you hear shipping up to Boston, which, again, I've played every time Boston's won for a long time now. And that's it. That's as close to celebrating as it gets. And, yeah, that's about it. I saw... In the time this channel's been going, I've seen Boston and Dallas go to a Stanley Cup final. Last year, that round 2 run by the Vancouver Canucks, I enjoyed that so much. I enjoyed it so much because I knew this was probably going to be a rarity. Because Vancouver history tells me it's a rarity. They make the finals in 82, 94, and 2011. They've never made it past round 2 other than that. That's it. They've never made it past round 2 other than those 3 examples of going to the Stanley Cup final. That's it. So every other year, once you get down to the final 4, they're not there. And so, yeah, again, we'll see what happens next year. But, I haven't got what happened to Boston yet, but I thought, you know what, I can do this because 2021, Dallas and Vancouver both missed the playoffs. Not entirely a surprise. Dallas misses the playoffs a lot. And I think it's because Dallas doesn't get the same amount of press as other teams, but Dallas misses the playoffs a ton. And yet people don't talk a lot about it. Not in comparison with Vancouver, obviously. But, yeah, Dallas does miss the playoffs pretty regularly, pretty often. So, yeah, there you go. My fandom in roughly 20 minutes. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and dang right, so I use this as an excuse to wear my Bo Horvat jersey, because why not? I will close with this. I think Vancouver's got a really good young core. I really like the core of the team. Whether or not they end up winning anything, it's a bonus if they do. I like the team, and we'll see how it goes from there. But I'm not screaming and yelling about Toffoli or anything, because I'm just happy for Toffoli in Montreal. I'm happy he had a career year. Best season he's ever had, and it's continued in the playoffs. Good for him. There you go. All right. Thanks again for all your support. It means a lot, and I will talk to you again soon.